Hello, I want to talk about three things in this video. One thing I want to talk about is ISO, the other is shutter speed, and the third is aperture. And hopefully this is going to give you a little better idea of what those three things do on the DSLR cameras that you are going to be using as we shoot video. Now I think the first thing that we need to make sure we understand is how to change these things, and if we go ahead and we turn on our camera, we're going to see that our screen pops up on the back. Now, the main dial right here is what controls our shutter speed. And so if I change that, our number right here is the shutter speed. It moves to 400. We can see it moving to 500, 640, 800. And so that's changing my shutter speed. If I want to change my aperture, I just go ahead and use my thumb here, and there is this AV button that you can see. I'm going to hold on. And if we see the number next to my shutter speed, it's going to start changing. It's at 3.4, it's at 4. It's slowly sliding up the scale right there, and that's going to allow me to change my shutter speed. Now the third thing I talked about was ISO, and we see here on the T5Is there is an ISO button. If I hold that in, my ISOs come up, and with the dials right here, I can cycle through my different ISOs that I have, and I can change my settings accordingly. Once I find the right one that I want, I go ahead and hit set, and I can change my ISO. So main dial by itself changes the shutter speed. Main dial with this AV button punched in changes the aperture. And the ISO button here on top, along with these cross keys, goes ahead and changes your ISO. Now, many people have asked and are wondering, what does ISO control and what does shutter speed control and what does aperture control? And briefly speaking, all three of them control light in one way or another. And if we take a look at that, what you would see is that with the ISO, the higher numbers let more light into the camera and the lower numbers let in less light. Shutter speed and aperture are both opposite of that. The higher the shutter speed number, or the higher the aperture number, the less light that's coming in, and the lower the number of shutter speed, or the lower number of aperture, the more light that's coming in. So if you see, we really have two groupings there. The shutter speed and the aperture deal with light one way, and the ISO deals with light in the opposite way. And that's very important because we need the right amount of light coming into the camera when we're making our video so that the video looks good and natural. Now, besides the amount of light that comes into the camera, the shutter speed, aperture, and ISO each also control one thing. Let's look at each of them individually a little bit. Now, the ISO controls the quality of the video that you're going to have, okay, and what it's going to look like. The lower ISO is going to allow for a smoother, more natural looking image, and the higher the ISO you go, the more pixelated and things are going to look. You're going to lose quality of video the higher you go. So a video shot at 200 ISO is going to look more crisp and clear and clean than a video shot at 6400 ISO or at 3200 ISO even. If we take a look at shutter speed, now shutter speed's a little bit different with photography than it is with video. But as a general rule, you want your shutter speed to be roughly twice as fast as the frame rate that you're using max. So our cameras right now, the frame rate that we're working on is 30. And if we have this camera up here, and if I click on the menu setting button and I come over to this video recording part right here, we see the movie recording size. It's a 19 by 20 by 1080, and then right there, there's a 30 underneath there, which means we're shooting at 30 frames per second. If I select that, there are some other options here where we could be shooting at 60 frames per second. We usually leave it at 1920 at 30 frames per second, which means for our video to look smooth and natural as much as possible, the shutter speed that we should be using is a 60. Now, you can go higher than that. It's going to change your video quality and give a different effect to it. So when you can, for the smoothest, most natural looking video, try to be twice the frame rate that you're shooting. And again, if we're shooting at 30 frames per second, you want to have your shutter speed at about a 60. Now the third setting is aperture, and what that does is it controls the background of the video that you're working with, and it decides whether that background is going to be in focus or out of focus. So let's say you had an object. When you go ahead and shoot that object, you know it's going to be in focus because you're going to focus in on it with either the autofocus with our shutter release button here, or we're going to be using the focus ring on the front of your video camera to make sure that we are focusing in on what we are doing. The depth of field does not control whether your object is in focus or not. The depth of field controls what's in front of and behind your object and if that's in focus. Now if we have a really, really high aperture like a 22, we're going to be able to have a lot of information in that video that's in focus. Whereas if we have a really, really low aperture, not much is going to be in focus. Now how I remember this is if I'm using an f-stop of like a 22, I can see 22 miles behind me in the video, and it's going to be in pretty sharp focus. Okay? Whereas if I'm using an aperture of 1.8, I can only see 1.8 miles, or let's put this in feet because that probably makes more sense. I can only see 1.8 feet behind me before things start to get blurry. But a 1.8 gives a very what's called shallow depth of field, meaning not a lot's in focus. Whereas something like a 22, we have a great depth of field and quite a bit is in focus. And that really is up to you with what you want to do. Do you want your subject to stand out and kind of pop out of the video, or do you want to be able to see the surroundings and scenery that they're in? And that's really about it. If you can get those things down, you're going to be in great shape. Aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. ISO controls light and the quality of the video that we have. The shutter speed controls how we see the motion and action, and we really should be about twice our frame rate. It also controls the light that's coming into the camera. And the last thing is the aperture, and the aperture deals with how much light's coming into the camera as well as what our depth of field is, how much we can see in focus in the video. And that's really what we have. So take a look at those things, think about them, and if you have questions, please don't hesitate to let me know. Thanks.